Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences Conversation series. My name is Annemieke Farrenholz, and I'm the Associate Dean Research in the faculty. The title of today's seminar is Advancing Protein Food Innovations at the University of Manitoba. I would like to acknowledge that the University of Manitoba is located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojai Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous peoples and communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Today marks our seventh and final faculty seminar in a virtual format before we take a break this summer. If you missed our previous seminars, there is an opportunity to view them via our faculty YouTube channel. As another option, you can also find the links to the seminar at our wonderful knowledge translation portal called the Manitoba Agricultural and Food Knowledge Exchange. For your reference, you can see the website address makemanitoba.ca on your screen. MakeManitoba.ca highlights our faculty research as it relates to consumers and producers. And we have a collection of podcasts, infographics, fact sheets, and even recipes. Please do check it out. Today, we have four speakers who will share with us a short summary of their research and then engage together in a conversation. As a viewer, you can participate in this conversation by sending your questions and comments via a chat platform. And right now, I would like to call upon Crystal Jurgensen, the Faculty Communication Specialist, to provide some guidance on how the audience can participate in today's presentation. So, Crystal, over to you.
Thanks, Annemieke. So today we're doing our question and answer period on the chat platform called slido.com, and you'll see the URL at the bottom of the screen there. And the way to participate is to enter the event code #UMProtein. And once you're in there, you can pose your questions, and we will be sharing those questions when we get to the Q&A portion of today's event. But maybe kick us off by just telling us where you're watching from. And I'll just note that there is a limited character count, so when we do come to the questions, try and keep them kind of succinct for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. So I suggest we review those instructions again when we get to the question and answer round towards the end of the conversation. So today's topic explores sustainable protein foods, including an overview of the research, technical expertise, and training capacity within the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences. Consumers are increasingly demanding protein foods as derived from both plant and animal sources. Currently, the growth of the protein food sector is being particularly driven by innovations in the plant and alternative protein markets. The province of Manitoba has made this area a priority with the establishment of the Manitoba Protein Advantage. Additionally, Canada has made substantial investment in the protein sector, with the hallmark being the establishment of the Protein Industry Canada, dedicated to the advancement of plant-based food and feed ingredients. The University of Manitoba has also committed to sustainable protein foods with the establishment of the new Tier 2 Canadian Research Chair in Protein Processing and Co-Product Utilization, who is Dr. Bandera. In addition, our faculty members are involved in a major training program which is called CAPTURE. And CAPTURE is funded by the Answer Create program and is designed to develop highly qualified personnel with the skills needed to advance protein food innovations. Today, we will hear from 4 members of our faculty who are involved with the Protein Foods Innovation team, or PROFIT for short. The first speaker is the lead of the Manitoba Protein Research Strategy, and the other speakers are the Research Development Manager affiliated with our Richardson Center for Functional Foods, as well as our Dairy Plant Manager and a PhD student involved in the CAPTURE program. So our first guest is Jim House. Jim House is the lead of the Manitoba Protein Research Strategy. Jim is a professor in the Department of Food and Human Nutritional Sciences and holds a PhD in amino acid nutrition and metabolism from the University of Guelph. At the University of Manitoba, Dr. Jim House has trained numerous graduate students and postdocs, as well as undergraduate research assistants. His research interest has been in amino acid metabolism in animals, as well as sustainable egg production systems, including novel value-added egg products, among other things. Dr. House's research program has advanced our understanding of factors affecting the utilization of plant and animal-based protein sources in the human diet. So with that, Jim, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farrenholz, and I'm happy to be here to talk about some of the work that we're doing here at the University of Manitoba and the faculty looking at advancing protein foods. I think I want to start off by just asking the question, what are protein foods? Because not everyone is aware of what we mean when we use this term. And the reason I think the term has become even more important is the fact that in the latest iteration of Canada's Food Guide, which was published in January of 2019, they initiated the use of this term, protein foods, replacing the more familiar terms of meat and alternatives and dairy and alternatives category. So you can see in the upper right quadrant of this new plate model, which is positioned by Canada's Food Guide, that there's a section that indicates that a quarter of your plate should be included as protein foods. Another statement that was made in Canada's Food Guide was also that we should be choosing protein foods that come from plants more often. Now, this term did create a lot of interest and a lot of debate and discussion about what we mean by choosing protein foods that come from plants more often. But I think when you put it in context of what we're currently eating as a population and where our protein is coming from, I think it's understandable as to why the Health Canada in particular is interested in at least trying to get people to focus a little bit more on the dietary quality or the balance of protein that's on their plate from a pattern perspective. A recent analysis of the 2015 CCHS analysis, which is a survey of the national databases looking at food intake in the Canadian population, showed that 64% of our protein is coming from animal sources and about 36% is coming from plant-based sources. This is consistent with other major jurisdictions, including the US, the Netherlands, and several EU countries. So we need to be thinking about that distribution of protein, but also the composition of that protein. So when we look at that plant protein, it's not what's actually being shown on the plate in the protein foods categories of beans and legumes and other plant-based sources. If you think about where our plant protein's actually coming from, it's actually coming from a lot of cereals and grains and breads. About 20% of our total protein intake is coming from breads, grains, and cereals, whereas nuts, seeds, and legumes are only about 5% of our total protein intake. So there is a little bit of a disconnect between what people are actually consuming and what the dietary guidelines are. So if we again look at this section, which is a little bit more aspirational in terms of what we want to see the Canadian population eating, we have to think in terms of what actually people are looking to consume when it comes to plant-based protein sources. And that's looking at this whole host, and these are just here as examples of new plant-based products that are on the marketplace, such as oat-based beverages, the Impossible Whopper, the Impossible Burger, and other plant-based sources such as dairy confectionaries, drinks, protein snacks, and protein bars. So there's a whole host of innovative new products that are coming on, but it's not necessarily in the same realm that Health Canada is thinking about. So when we think about these products, we need to be thinking about ensuring that we're positioning these plant-based sources with guidance in mind. And so certainly there's a lot of interest. We're seeing a 27% increase in sales in 2020 in these product categories. And this highlights the fact that this is a very interesting and a lot of substantial growth that we're seeing within that sector. Now, the other term that we hear a lot about is sustainable protein foods. And when we think about sustainability, we should be thinking around 4 different dimensions. The health, and that's really where Health Canada is coming in from the Canada's Food Guide, coming from a health perspective. But we need to be keeping in mind environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and sociocultural factors. These are all important attributes of a sustainable protein food system. And a food system such as what's described here on the right-hand side really looks at the whole cycle of how we're producing protein foods. And we need to be thinking about all dimensions of sustainability as we're really looking at this particular protein food system. Now, when we narrow in on some of the work that we're doing here at the University of Manitoba, we have a number of different areas looking at sustainable protein research within the faculty, including looking at plant breeding, advancing plant proteins for livestock nutrition, understanding plant protein functionality in foods, looking at novel natural health products from plant proteins, and plant proteins and human nutrition. I'm leading, along with our team, a strategy called the Manitoba Protein Research Strategy, which is intended to look at defining that research ecosystem as it relates to sustainable protein. And it's really helping us to understand all of the different attributes across those 4 different dimensions of sustainability, to get a more broader understanding of all the potential players, so that we can hopefully look at new collaborations to help this sector move forward. And one of the areas that we're particularly keen on is this Protein Foods Innovation Team, or PROFIT, which is a group of individuals that are within the faculty and working with a number of collaborators looking at enhancing protein foods across the spectrum. And so we've got 3 partners that we want to focus on in today's talk. One of them is, we're going to hear from the Richardson Center, we're going to hear from our dairy pilot plant, and we're going to also hear from one of our trainees within the Capture program, who will discuss some of the really interesting research that's happening within the faculty. And so I'll turn it over to Dr. Farrenholz as we introduce our next speakers.
Thank you very much, Dr. House. So the next person to welcome is Michael Janzen, and Michael is the Research Development Manager at the Richardson Center for Functional Foods and Nutraceuticals. Michael obtained a BSc honors from the University of Manitoba and a PhD from Western University. He also held a NSERC postdoctoral fellowship at Yale University. And after working as a research associate at the University of Illinois, Michael transitioned to the local pharmaceutical sector for about 13 years in a variety of roles. And we were very fortunate that Michael decided to come back to the University of Manitoba. So with that, please go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Farrenholz, for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak at the faculty seminar. The Richardson Center is a research center within the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences, and the center's mission is advancing food quality and human nutrition through traditional and innovative food processing techniques. And the center's mandate is supporting the food and agriculture value chain by engaging in collaborative research and development activities with the food industry. The mission and mandate are a key component of the center's 5-year strategic plan, which was finalized in May of last year. And a key piece of the planning process was consulting with a dozen local food industry stakeholders across the private sector, commodity organizations, and government. The center has a number of core capacities, but for the purpose of today's talk, I'll focus on the center's milling facility. It's 900 square feet and certified by the province of Manitoba as a food handling establishment for the processing of grains and oilseeds. And provincial certification allows us to process food ingredients for commercial human consumption within the province. And we're also seeking national certification through the Safe Foods for Canadians Act, which would allow us to process food ingredients for commercial human consumption across the country. The facility has 3 laboratory and 2 pilot mills and a pilot air classifier. And a milling facility generates lots of dust, and we have an air handler and dust collector systems such that dust accumulation is minimized and the facility can operate in a safe and clean manner. The center has experience processing a variety of grains grown in the Canadian prairies, from peas to oats to quinoa to wild rice, just to name a few. And here's a case study from the center involving the milling of split yellow peas. And depending on if we use our lab mill or our pilot mill, we can mill between 200 grams and 2,000 kilograms of split yellow peas, generating the pea flour. And a key characteristic of a flour is its particle size, and typical particle size data is shown on the bottom left. And this data shows that most of the pea flour is below 100 microns in diameter. Particle size is a key characteristic for flour because it impacts many aspects of the final food product, from water absorption to texture to mouthfeel and to taste. We also have capacity at the center to increase the protein content of split yellow peas using a process called air classification. Air classification uses a rapidly rotating fan plus airflow to separate a flour into fine and coarse fractions. So in the example here, split yellow peas are first fed into the mill, generating a flour, which then directly flows into the air classifier, generating fine and coarse materials. And we typically obtain the fine fraction in 20 to 35% yield, and the coarse fraction in 65 to 80% yield. Because no solvent is used in air classifying, is often referred to as a green processing technology. In addition, air classifying is low cost and low energy consumption. The fine flour fraction is the value-added product with an increase in protein of up to 60%, starting from 26%, and can be used in as a plant-based protein source for the food industry. And examples include bars and extruded snacks. A limitation with using pea protein as a food ingredient is its bitter taste. So in the food development process, the bitter taste should be minimized by either deactivating the bitter compounds or by adding flavoring agents masking the bitter taste. The coarse fraction contains a high level of starch and is a low value product with limited food applications. So this presents an economic challenge for food processors. If money can't be made on the coarse fraction, then profitability on the overall process is limited. We have a small but dedicated team at the Richardson Center. The center is led by the director, Dr. Rutimio Luco. The center's associate director is Dr. Simone Myrie. Mina Reyna is our business manager. Peter Froelich and John Batchu lead our technical team. And between the two of them, they have over 30 years of experience in the food processing sector. And Jasmine Arnold is our office assistant. Thank you for listening and for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Janzen, and thanks for helping us to better understand the center. Next up, I would like to welcome John Thoroski, and John is the Dairy Plant Manager in the Department of Food and Human Nutritional Sciences. John earned both his BSc and MSc from the University of Manitoba. His BSc in agriculture had a major in food science, and his MSc in food science focused on food microbiology. John has over 26 years of industrial experience in food science management positions. So with that, over to you, John.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Farrenholz. I'd like to say I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm thrilled to be part of this team. Can you go back to the dairy slide? Thanks. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say the Dairy Science Building, that's our facility. It's located at the beginning of, or actually the end of Aggie Row, okay, right beside the Arthur Morrow student residence. Our facility is licensed for dairy food manufacturing by the CFIA. So we can manufacture dairy foods and basically have them sold all across Canada. We're also a teaching facility. We teach classes for food and human nutritional sciences, undergraduate courses in fermented dairy products and frozen dairy products, and we help out with some of the other courses. We don't really focus too much on basic research, but we do a significant work with applied research, mostly on behalf of private clients and doing food product development, and most of that is proprietary. And I wanted to talk today about how we can expand some of the principles of dairy science to the new novel protein foods and different applications. The first thing I wanted to talk about was protein coagulation and concentration. We coagulate dairy proteins in a variety of ways, okay? You all know we use acid and use bacterial cultures, okay? And by using bacterial cultures, we can produce products like yogurt and sour cream. We can also use a combination of acid and heat to coagulate the proteins, and we can make specialty cheeses like paneer and queso blanco that are fresh cheeses. We also use enzymes, okay, enzymes in combination with bacterial cultures to make a wide variety of cheeses, okay, and we can get the proteins to coagulate that way. We also employ different salts, okay, and we use salts to change the structure, okay, of the coagulated protein. And if you look on lots of dairy products, you'll see most of them have different salts added for this purpose. On the right slide, we have our concentrated protein, which is basically cheese blocks. And the way we concentrate it is usually a combination of filtering and pressure. So to make cheese, we'll put cheese in cheesecloth, push out the whey, and concentrate the protein. It's very, very similar to the way tofu is made. In fact, we worked with the Prairie Research Kitchen, Heather Hill's team. They developed a method to make tofu using faba beans and hemp, and they brought it over to our plant to do pilot trials, larger scale trials, and it worked very well. So I wanted to just point out that can be used. These dairy science principles can be used for these novel applications. Next slide. I also wanted to talk about how we manipulate protein functionality in dairy products and how this can also be applied to the novel techniques that we can use. One is we modify proteins so they act as stabilizers in ice cream and frozen dairy products. We modify proteins so that they enhance the body and texture in dairy products, in ice cream again, for sure, and different cheeses. We modify the proteins so that they cause gelation and they gel in proteins like yogurt and sour cream. We can modify the proteins so they whip better in products like whipped cream and ice cream and frozen desserts. And we also cause denaturation in proteins. And you might think denaturation might be a bad thing in proteins, but sometime in food processing, it's a really good thing to do. And we cause denaturation in products such as yogurt, believe it or not, and paneer products. I also wanted to emphasize that we use enzymes, okay? And enzymes themselves are also proteins. The use of enzymes in this field is limitless, and we use enzymes in dairy in many ways. We use enzymes in cheeses. We use enzymes to make hydrolyzed whey protein concentrate, and we use enzymes to make branched chain amino acids, you know, for athletes and things like that. Next slide. This I wanted to point out is another way we enhance the functionality of dairy proteins is we call it protein melting. Okay, it's not really, we don't really melt the protein, but what we do is we modify the protein structure using a combination of salts, pH, and heat. Okay, and I call it, when I teach it to the students, I call it magic. It's like magic, but it's really science. And it converts casein into a very smooth, homogeneous product. And you know it as processed cheese. It's processed cheese spread or cheese whiz. You know, everybody's had cheese whiz, and you can kind of see the picture on the right-hand side of cheese whiz. Like I said, it's like magic. These products are very, very popular and value added. And we can do the same thing, okay, to vegetable protein. The real benefits of this is the products have easy machinability. Okay, they can be easily sliced, they can be shredded, they can be diced, and you can also pump it. You can put it in a liquid form and pump it back and forth, which can be very valuable in food processing plants. And I'll move on to the final slide. Currently, there are a lot of non-dairy applications for historical products that were known as dairy products. And these are really, really hot commodities right now. The super hot one is the non-dairy beverages. And I'm sure you've all heard of oat milk and how oat milk is growing faster than anybody ever thought that it would. Well, that race is still on, and people are still trying to make the best oat milk. Okay, and there's also other protein sources in line to go that are going to come after the oat milk as well. Another one that is extremely hot is the non-dairy frozen desserts. And on the right-hand side of the page, I've got a picture of a product we made for one of our clients that is completely vegan. It is very creamy, smooth, tastes very much like ice cream. And that product was a candy floss product. So candy floss flavor. It's a pink product, and the client really loved it. Another really hot category is non-dairy fermented foods. And this one is going to continue to grow. So that being said, I just wanted to really let you know there's lots of room for using these principles in other protein applications besides just dairy. And thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Listening to you and seeing the photos made me very hungry. And I have tasted the cheeses made by the faculty, and I thought they were delicious. And that's probably a compliment, given that I'm originally from the Netherlands. So last but not least, I would like to invite Nancy Asen. And Nancy is a PhD student in the Department of Food and Nutritional Sciences. Nancy received her degree in microbiology from Nigeria and subsequently gained industry experience in the food sector. Nancy earned a master's degree in food science from Washington State University in 2017 and proceeded to gain experience in food safety extension, also at Washington State University. And we were fortunate to recruit Nancy, and she started her new adventure at the University of Manitoba and is currently in her third year of her PhD working with plant proteins. So with that, Nancy, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Farrenholz. Thank you for having me here. It's a privilege to be here. So I'm talking about protein and food applications. Building upon what all that has been said, beyond the nutritional benefits we get from proteins, we have the functional properties of proteins. Proteins are very versatile. So they can have forms like what John just spoke about, ice cream. They're able to form gels, emulsions, and this is what makes it very versatile and is used in the food industry for formulation of foods. Just a very simple example would be mayonnaise. So mayonnaise is an oil and water emulsion. And because you have two different phases in there, you need a surface active substance. And one of the very popular ones that are used in the industry are the twin. These are chemical based, and proteins can very much replace this. So without a surfactant, you're not going to have a homogeneous mayonnaise. You're going to just have a free-flowing liquid, which you will not like. So proteins do a lot of things. And in my research, I'm working with the plant proteins. Dr. Howe said a bit about this. Plant proteins have a lot of benefits, highly sustainable, very good for the environment, even cost and the health. However, we have a challenge with plant proteins, because these the storage proteins of plants are high, they are globular, and they are very complex and compact. As a result, they have a low surface charge, net charge, and that causes low solubility and low flexibility. Now, solubility is a very important functionality in food formulation, because you want your substance or your ingredient to be highly soluble, to be able to homogenize, or to be homogenized properly within your food system. So when the solubility is low, is very difficult. However, we could modify the structures. Now, this is an example of a globular protein. You can see that this is highly complex. Having a structure like this, you know that you have some of the ionizable groups hidden inside the structure. So solubility is going to be very high. But when you denature this, like John just spoke about the denaturation, you denature it and it unfolds, it's going to be flexible. And this makes it better for whatever functionality you want to use in your food. So this is an experiment we did in the lab. Our protein was yellowfield pea protein, 70% protein. It was quite a very simple experiment, but we had very good results from this. We got this protein, got the slurry, prepared the slurry with water, adjusted to 4 different pH, and then we heat treated it to 100 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, centrifuged it, passed it through the ultrafiltration, and collected different fractions. Actually, we had 3 fractions collected. We named, they were less than 30 kDa. Then we had between 30 and 50 kDa. Then we had above 50 kDa. Now, above 50 kDa fraction had higher protein content. So we went ahead with that for our other analysis. Now, this is a very interesting image we got from the higher than 50 kDa fractions. You can see here the PPC and the FT5. Now, if you correlate this with the solubility, PPC and FT5 had the lowest solubility. If you look at their structures, they are quite very similar. Then we had an FT3 and then FT9 having better solubility. You can see that here and here. Then look at the structures, also very, very similar. So this was very interesting. And then we'll also, I'll just show you, this is the oil holding capacity of the 5 different or the 4 different treatments. Here also we had over 100% improvement in the oil holding capacity after treatment, especially at FT3, FT7, and FT9. Of course, FT5 had the lowest solubility, also had the lowest oil holding capacity when you compare to these other ones, because it was treated around the isoelectric point of this protein. So what does this mean? This study means that we have new information about stable aggregates or stable heat aggregates and soluble aggregates that have better functionality than native proteins. Now, for solubility, this, especially for FT3, we could see that FT3 had very good solubility, both at the acidic and the alkaline pH. This could be very good in production of beverages at all pH. Then we have the oil holding capacity, which makes this protein very, very functional in production of bakery goods or fish products, and then even flavor interactions and binding and yogurts and all that. So this is a very eye-opening study, and we are still going on with it to check some other functionalities of what we could do with this kind of treatment. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Nancy and Jim and John and Michael. And I would like to call you back, John and Michael and Jim. And perhaps we can have a bit of a general discussion about what you have presented. But before we do that, I would like to call upon Crystal to remind the audience how they can ask questions as well.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for that presentation. Wow, I am hungry now. So just a reminder that you'll want to visit slido.com. You'll see it at the bottom of the screen there, and enter the event code #UMProtein. And that's where you can share your questions or your comments with us, and we will go over those when we get to the Q&A session. Again, just try to be succinct, and we'll go over them very shortly. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Crystal. And while we're waiting for the first questions to pop up, maybe I can start. And Crystal mentioned that she was getting hungry. I was feeling the same. And so my first question to each of you, what is your favorite protein food and why?
Well, who wants to answer that one? Let me just, it's been an interesting time in our household. I think it's I have a daughter who can't eat gluten, so that poses some challenges. And she's also a vegan, so her lifestyle and dietary choices are having an impact on the whole family in a positive way. I think we're actually living that increasing plant protein experience. And, I think it's really been exciting to see the new innovations that are happening, and really put some of the research that we're doing in focus in terms of all the new products that are coming in, and not just plant proteins. And you also look at new exciting blends of plant and animal proteins that are coming on the marketplace right now, because that's another way of looking at reducing or increasing plant protein intake, is to look at novel blends that are blending traditional animal-based foods with new plant proteins. And that brings in all of that research that Nancy was talking about, and the expertise that John and Michael were talking about in terms of how we can create those blends, keep them, have the good sensory attributes. For me, this is a long-winded answer to your question, but some of the new proteins, there's some really fascinating things coming out on some of the new pastas and some of the new, but I think it's that non-dairy ice creams that are coming out that there's a lot of, let's say they're popular in our house, let's just say.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else who would like to confess about what they like to eat? Or
Sure. I like all protein foods. I can't really think of one that I don't like, but I'd have to say my favorite go-to right now is a sandwich, okay? And it's made with toast, and I put big slabs old cheddar cheese, and then some big thick cut onion, and then put the piece of toast on top, and I eat that, and that is like being in heaven. So that's my go-to.
I'll have to try that.
And it goes good with beer or coffee.
Just don't share an office with John when he's eating his sandwich.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to be remote.
Yeah. So one question that came to my mind when I was listening to Michael's presentation, he was presenting on the particle size, and I'm a soil scientist, and we actually often do particle size distribution. And when you showed that slide, I think it was pea flour, and it looked to me was a nice normal distribution, or at least it probably would fit a normal distribution. And I'm wondering, is that very common, and is that something that is being strived for, or do you also have different distributions?
So that distribution is related to the screen size that we use in our mill, and so the finer the screen, the closer we get to that nice curve. The coarser screens, then you kind of get a double hump curve. You get a portion of the portion of the material is of a smaller particle size, and then a second portion which is of a larger particle size, and then the milling process reduces that second hump considerably down to get a nicer curve.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
maybe
if you
I'll just
have a
comment too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's also a logarithmic scale, so that might skew it a little bit in terms of the distribution that you're seeing. So that
I see. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I just saw some relation to soil science there, and then another question I had, Michael. You were talking about the air classification and versus wet processing, and I wonder, is this air method, is that widely used, or is it still relatively unique? And people use mostly the wet processing. I just wonder if you can comment on that.
Yeah, air classification is used commercially. There are uses for it. As I mentioned, it's a green process, no solvents, low usage cost, and low energy cost. There are advantages to wet processing, and these are some of the new plants built in the prairies are wet processing. Their advantages are that they can yield a protein isolate in greater than 90%, whereas air classification is limited to about 60%. The product that you get is generally has little taste and little flavor, so it makes for an ideal food ingredient with a wide range of food applications. The drawback with wet processing is it's high energy consumption and uses a lot of water.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Question for Nancy. You were talking about solubility, and again, I can relate to it because I'm working with analytical grade pesticide compounds, and some are really water soluble, and other ones not so much. And I was curious in terms of solubility. Are you generally striving towards high water solubility or low water solubility, or there's no such thing, and it really depends on the application? So that's one question. And my other question is, do you tend to focus on water solubility or also solubility in let's say organic solvents?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so generally, in most food applications, we're looking at water solubility. And in this study, we saw a correlation between solubility, that's oil holding capacity, and water holding capacity. So I don't know why that was, but it was a wonderful correlation. So, but actually, for food generally, because you want your ingredients to dissolve and mix up within. Then you're having beverages. You want a low viscosity beverage. You don't want to have some lumps on the inside, right? You want everything to be all in. So water solubility is very much important to us. But like I said, in this study, the oil holding capacity and the water holding capacity had a very good correlation again. So I think that is linked, and we are still working in that area. So to get more water,
What's nice about what Nancy's results were showing is that for application specific, if you're looking for a very acidic beverage, something that has maybe ascorbic acid that has added to it to give that tangy flavor to it, you're going to have a very low pH. And so and if you want to have a protein fortified acidic beverage, you need to have a protein that's going to be soluble at low pH. And the same thing if you go more on the alkalines, right? So, having that range and that understanding of where different protein fractions are soluble. And every plant's different. Every protein source is different, and how you modify it will also lead to differences as well. And so having the ability to characterize those functional attributes is really important.
Yeah, very, very interesting, and great work, Nancy. I assume it's all part of your PhD study. So,
yeah.
So I just got a hint from Crystal, who mentioned that we have some questions from the audience. So I suggest we look at those questions. I can ask questions anytime. So Crystal, please go ahead.
Oh, jeez. Well, I can see the first one. It says, is access to cheese a benefit or the purpose of getting into food research? And so, I think obviously that is definitely a benefit of being involved in the Department of Food and Human Nutritional Sciences. You get access to a number of different food products, but I think the dairy products are definitely high on the interest line, because I tell you that the pilot plant makes a very nice dairy product. So it's using that knowledge to the plant protein sector is also going to benefit that sector as well, and moving that forward. But certainly, it is a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add too. Oh, sorry. I'll just add that making the cheese is super fun.
Awesome.
And tasty.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'm just going to get them to scroll down just a little, because I think we missed one just below the list. Oh, no. Here we go. Let's start with, are there any plant proteins that whip as good as egg whites?
Okay. I can say something about that. There's no native plant protein that can whip as good as egg whites. You have an albumin highly soluble in water. So this, like as I showed you in my slides, plant proteins in their native form are highly complex. But once you modify them, we have different ways of modifying them. We did heat denaturation. You have enzymes, you could do that. You can reduce, you can modify the structure with enzymes. You can use some other physical methods like ultrasonication. So when you do that, yes, you can have it. You can, once the structure becomes very flexible, you're going to be able to get a protein, the plant protein that can whip as good as egg white. But in the native form, no, there is no.
Yeah, Nancy's correct. Like some of the plant proteins are really challenging to work with. The animal proteins have some really unique attributes, and egg white has a lot of really functional properties. And John spent years working with egg proteins. But one of the ones that's really gained a lot of interest, there's a product called aquafaba. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with that, but it's actually the liquid that you strain off your can of chickpeas. Before you, and don't toss it, you keep that liquid. If you actually cool it and then whip it, it probably takes about 4 times the amount of time that it does to whip a meringue with egg whites. But you can actually get because of the foaming properties within that, with that chickpea brine, you can actually get a meringue that form, but it does take an awful lot of mechanical energy to create that. So, but it is an interesting vegan option to meringues, but it might be a little bit more of an acquired taste. You need a little bit more sugar to make it palatable, that's for sure.
That's great. Another question. What are some of the key factors challenging the positioning of sustainable foods for consumers?
Well, that's an interesting one. I'm happy to put out to start the ball rolling on that one. I think, that when you look at the definition of sustainability, there's multiple dimensions, and I think part of the challenge is from what angle are you defining sustainability? If you're talking about it from a health perspective, certainly the Health Canada would advocate for looking at products that would provide lower contents of sodium, saturated fat, and added sugars. And that's certainly the direction from a health perspective due to the linkage of those particular components with chronic disease risk. But if you're looking at environmental sustainability, it's just the absence of necessarily of data for full life cycle assessment of the sustainability metrics for different animal versus plant proteins. I think we're getting there, but I think we have to agree on the metrics. And I think that's where we need people working in the broader agri-ecosystem to really help move that system forward for defining what we mean by sustainable. It's not as simple as just saying sustainable, because there's it means different things to different people, and we need good metrics.
Yeah, thank you. If I may ask another question, John, you mentioned that the dairy foods are actually sold across Canada, And I just wonder whether we also sell it internationally, or are there some rules and regulations that prevent that?
There's nothing from our pilot plant that's sold internationally right now. But if we ever wanted to sell anything internationally from our pilot plant, we would be able to do so because we are licensed by the CFIA. We would just have to go through the exporting process, and we'd also have to go through the dairy farmers of Manitoba to make sure that they'd allow us to export product. It's a lot easier to export than it is to import.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And Crystal just mentioned that there are more questions from the audience. So over to you, Crystal.
Thanks, Annemieke. Leanne Murphy is asking a question for everyone. Current focus is on plant-based products or mimics. What opportunities should we be working towards to keep Manitoba at the forefront of protein innovation?
Very good question.
That's a great question, Nancy. What's your perspective as someone who's heavily engaged in the research? Where do you see opportunities and the innovation, in particular in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so Manitoba has pea protein as one of the main plant protein sources, and I would say we need to add value to what that is. I know that in the past, plant proteins were used a lot for other things other than human nutrition, but at least in the last 20 decades now, we are using that for human nutrition and as a source of protein. So I would love to say that for every I'd love to say that we have to valorize pea protein, like what we are doing now. We trying to find ways of using them, because those could be like byproducts thrown out, or maybe in the past they were used for animal feeds or something. But now we are seeing that these proteins could be modified. They could be used as ingredients in the food industry, right? So we need to put more in that area and look at what we can do with it. Because plant proteins are highly, though we know that plant proteins they don't have the complete amino acids, but like pea protein is very high in lysine. And we were talking about composites. I think Dr. Howe spoke about composites, right? So we can still have composite protein flours that will complement. Even if one is lacking, we don't have a lot of methionine in these, we can actually complement and have a full protein in one flour by having composite and flour. So we have a lot of things we could do with this in Manitoba. We are in a very strategic place to do that.
Yeah, we have tremendous products that are available to us. I think value add is, as Nancy mentioned, is critical. We've got substantial investment happening on the isolation and concentration side. I think the next step would be, let's move that forward, continue to look at our existing product base that we have available to us. With the research and investment in innovation, we can develop even new ingredients and new final products that could help create more industry, more opportunities within the province to extend our resource base even further. I think valorization is a good term that Nancy used.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy and Jim. We're almost out of time, but I do know that there are a couple more questions. So, Crystal, let's try to squeeze in some more.
Yeah, Peter Froelich is asking, is there a ratio of pulse protein to cereal protein that would yield a complete protein?
That might be directed to me. Thanks, Peter. So a good rule of thumb, it's different for every cereal protein and pulse protein, but typically what we've seen is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% pulse to 70% cereal. If you're thinking wheat or oat, is generally that sort of magic range that you get to where you can balance, where you can complement the amino acid profile to get the highest score that's possible, somewhere around that 30% to 40% pulse inclusion to a cereal. It also happens to be range that also allows you to maintain a lot of those nice sensory properties of bread making and pasta making, but you can increase the nutritional value by what's called complementary protein choices. And so about 30 to 40% pulse to the remainder of cereal.
Okay, Crystal, let's do one more, and then I think we really have to wrap it up.
Okay, I'll go with the broad question. We sort of have talked around it, but in terms of commercialized applications, what are the challenges for the plant-based industry in Manitoba?
Michael, do you want to comment based on some of the experiences that you've seen at Richardson Center, but maybe just some of the challenges that you've heard from people that you've been working with?
Well, certainly we deal with smaller type companies, so they have lots of great ideas and potential food applications. And research is expensive, so this is a challenge how we can fund these innovative projects in the appropriate budget. So getting the necessary funds to get these initial ideas from early stages to later stages would be one challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's that you think you hit the nail on the head. Is that seed funding to help small companies, and certainly when you're seeing opportunities through some of the government sources, either through the NRC programs or Protein Industries Canada and opportunities for investments that's coming in. That's been a real boon to the Western economy and around proteins for sure.
Yeah, thank you all. I think this is a great end note. I would like to thank Nancy, John, Michael, and Jim very much for your time. I did enjoy our conversation. And speaking of protein, I also want to highlight that there is a symposium coming up, which is the Manitoba Sustainable Protein Research Symposium. And that's to be held on June 22nd. 23rd and 24th, 2021. And it is a free event, and it's hosted by the University of Manitoba, Manitoba Agriculture and Resource Development, and the Manitoba Industry Academia Partnership. So feel free to register today or tomorrow, and the link can be found in our YouTube description that hopefully you will see shortly. And otherwise, you can contact Crystal Jurgensen for the link. I've really enjoyed this faculty conversation series 2020-2021. I'm a bit sad that this is the last one and that we have to take a break, but I hope that you all join us again in the fall when we are starting up again. And if you want to look ahead and what we might have to offer in due time, please look at makemanitoba.ca. We post a lot of information there about our research and upcoming events. And as well as if you haven't done so already, please sign up for our email service that is called Ag E-News, and you see the email address on your screen, so you can sign up that way, and that way you don't have to miss any of our events that are coming up, and you also learn about what we have been up to in the recent past. So with that, thank you for listening. Have a good evening and enjoy your summer. Thank you very much.